After 6 years of breaking records in this game, I have finally decided to make a video explaining all of the strats that I'm doing and how the route works. Because a lot of people know about this game, and they may have watched it a couple of times, maybe they even watched it every single day, but they just don't understand how it works. Now, if you're trying to get into speedrunning the game yourself, this is not the video you're looking for. I will link that in the description, but you want to go to the tutorial video, which is designed for beginners who are not ready to do these strategies yet. Because most of the stuff is extremely precise, and I am sure that by the end of this video, you're not only going to find more entertainment value in these runs, but you're also going to have a lot more respect for how hard we worked to figure this out over the years. So let's take a look at this. The most basic thing you have to understand about this run is that it's a collect-a-thon platformer. Adventuring and combat aspects are still very prevalent in this game, but that is how we'll be viewing it as a speedrun. So we're going to be collecting things to open up new areas to collect more things. And the first example of this is right here, on this closet door that costs 50 of these shiny objects. That's literally what they're called, is shiny objects. So the first example of speedrun routing you'll see here is when we collect these shiny objects in this kitchen and a little bit in the bathroom to reach the number of 50 that is required to enter this door. In doing so, we've now uncovered this golden spatula, which is the game's main mode of progression. Shiny objects can still be used to make purchases throughout the game. However, the golden spatula is what's going to be used to unlock new levels, and eventually the final boss when we collect 75 of them. So this is just one of 75, and we're going to use this to unlock the pineapple and enter the first area of the main hub world, which gives us access to a few new areas to unlock. Fortunately for us, one of the areas accessible through the hub is actually unlocked for us already, Jellyfish Fields. And while the other two areas downtown and Goo Lagoon cost 5 and 10 spatulas to unlock respectively, we can explore Jellyfish Fields and this area of the hub world to find enough spatulas to unlock both of them. However, as you're probably aware with speedrunning, we're not going to be doing things as intended by the developers. You see, this is just one area of the hub world, and there are 2 others just like it, where there are 3 more accessible areas per each area, totaling to 9. To reach the second area of the hub as intended, you have to defeat the first major boss, Robo Sandy, and to reach the second area as intended, you must defeat the second boss, Robo Patrick. The reason why we can't just do this now is because both of these bosses require higher numbers of spatulas we can't obtain at this given point in time. But pay very close attention, because even at these early phases of the run, we're setting things up to skip over to these areas and collect spatulas in these locked worlds earlier than intended. After leaving the pineapple, we are free to go wherever, but the first deliberate thing we're going to do is walk over to Patrick and unlock his task in the menu, while also collecting a sock from him. Battle for Bikini Bottom has a very convenient pause menu which allows you to warp to any of the tasks you've already received from the characters in the game. So now that we've talked to Patrick, we can warp back to him later to complete one of his missions. And this ties directly into the sock that's actually sitting in front of him, because we need to collect 10 of these to trade for 1 golden spatula. And a big part of the routing decisions that we make throughout this run is how many socks to collect and when to collect them. So just to recap, there are 3 main collectibles you're looking out for. Shiny objects, the game's main form of currency, socks, 10 of which can be traded for 1 golden spatula, and golden spatulas, which are used to unlock new areas and eventually the final boss fight. So now that we've unlocked Patrick's warp, which is going to be used for an important glitch later, we're going to do some platforming to get on top of the Jellyfish Fields taxi pad. Taxi pads are used to transport SpongeBob to new levels, but you're going to notice throughout the run that we're going to enter these in very strange ways. This first one is unique, however, because we're using it to activate a very important glitch that is going to change the course of the rest of the run. By using the bubble bounce above the text prompt to accept the taxi call, SpongeBob can suspend himself in air with this move for long enough to call the taxi. However, when you call the taxi, the game usually stops you from moving after that, so when the loading zone appears to send the player into the new area, they can't just walk around and avoid it. Otherwise, the game would softlock. But by using the bubble bounce attack above the taxi pad and bouncing over the text prompt and back into it, it gives us the text prompt a second time, which allows us to regain control of SpongeBob and walk around despite the loading zone having already been called. So you may not be able to see it, but there is a big invisible box here that when touched, SpongeBob gets sent to Jellyfish Fields. Now by falling onto the sand behind the taxi pad, SpongeBob is now out of bounds. And when out of bounds, SpongeBob can only last for 2 seconds before the hand is triggered to grab him and bring him back into bounds. This is the game's form of out-of-bound detection, which keeps the player in bounds without having to wall them in with invisible walls. It makes the game feel more open, which I think is a really neat choice of game design and also incorporates a reference from the show. But not to digress, this is super important for the run, because if the hand grabs SpongeBob and while dragging him off the screen causes him to collide with the trigger that brings him into Jellyfish Fields, we will enter the level with the hand still being on the screen. Now, why is this extremely important? If the hand is currently grabbing SpongeBob and he's already out of bounds, it wouldn't have made sense for the developers to allow SpongeBob to get grabbed again. Because if SpongeBob is out of bounds and the hand is currently grabbing him, if just being out of bounds caused the hand to come on screen, then he would constantly get grabbed over and over again, which would cause you to soft lock in place. So once the hand comes out onto the screen, SpongeBob can no longer get grabbed because he's already being grabbed. And once the hand leaves the screen, the game resets the memory value that allows SpongeBob to get grabbed once again. So if we leave the level with the hand on the screen, the hand never reaches the point where that memory value gets reset. So now we can go out of bounds while the hand can't currently grab us. You've probably seen this trick a million times and you've heard of it from all sorts of places even if you've never seen the run before. But isn't it cool just understanding why this works? And the only way we can get grabbed for going out of bounds again is if we go back on the out of bounds sand and stay there for 2 seconds. Going out of bounds and jumping into these trigger-like kill zones will not actually cause the hand to come onto the screen. So as long as we can avoid staying on out of bounds sand for more than 2 seconds at a time, we can avoid out of bounds detection and go anywhere for the entire run. And the best part is, this is not even nearly the coolest thing you can do in this game. So pay close attention, here we go. As early as this first stretch in Jellyfish Fields, we're already paying attention to how many shiny objects we have in the upper right corner of the screen. We need this number to be at 3,000 before we reach the end of the Dream 1 hub split, which you can see outlined on my splits here. Not the exact end, but at the end of one of the final splits in that section, the Krusty Krab. I hope I'm not spoiling anything, but if you've already played this game, you know the Krusty Krab is in the third hub area, which we currently don't have access to. So that should give you an idea of how crazy the first 10 minutes of this run is going to be. These robots that freely roam in this area are actually the first instance of RNG in the run. There's not a lot of it and it doesn't impact much, but just keep in mind that the way most of these enemies spawn and behave in this game is dictated by RNG. This specific instance is not a big deal though, because if we can't get a good hit on these robots, there are other opportunities to get more shiny objects later. But ideally, we want to hit both of them at the same time, because in doing so, we get extra shiny objects as a bonus for comboing them. For every shiny object yielding entity hit within 1.1 seconds of succession, you get increased combo bonuses. So in some situations, hitting small and mostly worthless things can actually be worth it if you hit them together. And that brings us to one of the largest skips we use in Jellyfish Fields, which was actually discovered over a decade ago. If you've watched the speedrun history videos I made on this game a while ago, you know what I'm talking about. And I think it's so cool that this is one of the only skips in the run that is left exactly as it was 10 years ago. It's just that optimized. After leaving a ledge and going airborne, SpongeBob has 1/4 of a second to jump before he starts going into freefall. So we're going to take advantage of this as much as we can and jump at the last possible moment, so that way we get enough distance on the first jump and take as much advantage of sliding off the cliff as quickly as possible on the last jump to touch the floating spatula as quickly as possible. And we are accomplishing 3 things by doing this other than just getting another spatula. The first, of course, is skipping a spatula celebration. When collecting a spatula, SpongeBob stands for 6 seconds and celebrates the collection. And obviously we want to skip this whenever possible, and it is possible to do it if you die while collecting a spatula. So in collecting the spatula, SpongeBob dies. The death allows you to regain control of the pause menu. So we're going to pause the game as soon as we respawn, which will skip the celebration effectively. Now you'll notice on this row there are 3 different types of icons here. The silver spatula for tasks that are received but not completed, the golden spatula for tasks which are completed, and the question marks which are for tasks which have not been received. And this Cowabungie spatula is the one we just collected despite not receiving a task for it. And if you haven't played this game before and you're curious, the first silver spatula was unlocked by talking to Squidward at the start of the level. But we're going to warp to Cowabungie, which will send us to the location where we'd usually receive the task for the spatula we just collected by jumping out of bounds and grabbing it. This is the first use of the hand disabling trick we used earlier to skip a major area of gameplay, because in a normal playthrough without using glitches, trying to get this spatula by jumping into this pit would cause the hand to grab you and place you at the last checkpoint. So that was a huge skip, and for real, if you have this game at home and you want to try this is a very simple thing to do. All you have to do is disable the hand and space some jumps to grab the spatula. You'll also find that disabling the hand allows for a lot of cool out of bounds exploration as well. And once again, all this stuff is detailed in the major tutorial I made for the game a while back. That is linked in the description. You're probably noticing that on the platforming up to this next level of Jellyfish Fields, we're mostly avoiding these shiny objects floating on these platforms. That is because the yellow shiny objects are only worth 2 each. So the amount of time that we save from cutting corners around these heavily outweighs the amount of time that we'd save from collecting each of these with a value of 2. You'll see that throughout the rest of this earlier section of the run, there's a lot of decision making like that where we skip things that are not worth getting, because the number we end up with at the end, while not being an exact calculation, gives us us a very safe range of shiny objects to be in without having to go out of the way for stuff. Now we've reached the first advanced level trick in the game. This is what we refer to as hammer skip. This robot here has a hammer arm that is literally made of ham, and he's going to attempt to swing at me when I get close. However, because it's an AI, I can manipulate it to move into a spot where I want it, which can then be used to skip another major portion of this level. And yes, for those of you who are wondering, this robot's wandering path is determined by RNG. So by the time it notices me, it's going to be in a random spot, also relative to this fish over here, which has a random wandering path as well. So fortunately here I got lucky, and the robot can run right past the fish instead of getting caught on it. But ideally we want exactly what happens here. The robot notices me and runs over to where I'm running. Keep an eye on where I'm running as well. We want the robot to run up onto this big hump in the hill so we can jump on top of it and use it to boost onto the cliff. So because the robot isn't chasing me and is rather going to the place where I'm going to be, you can actually draw two lines and meet an angle right here on the part of the cliff where I want it to go. And it's going to line up its attack to swing exactly where I was headed. Now that it's right where I want it, I'm going to jump up higher onto the cliff so it moves to position itself into a place where it can swing at where I'm going again. And now it's right here, in a spot where I can jump on its head, but also get a lot of fall distance. SpongeBob canonically cannot swim, and in the SpongeBob universe, this is not referred to as water. It's actually undersea goo. So let's just get that out of the way before we have any questions about that. But when SpongeBob touches the goo, he's put in a position which is not safe, and therefore the game is going to bounce him back to safety. The safety area is the last place the game detected the player was walking on ground. In this case, it's on top of the hammer robot's head, which is why I lured him as high as possible, so I get sent back up in that direction as high as possible. This is absolutely necessary to reach the next area of the game and skip this whole tutorial section of Jellyfish Fields. But we're not done yet. This is where the hard part comes in. You will not have this perspective now unless you've played before, but take a look at the way SpongeBob animates when he gets sent back up from the goo. There are actually 5 different animations that can play when SpongeBob gets hurt like this, and they are entirely predictable based on the one that played the last time you received damage or touched goo. At the very end of each of these animations, there is one single frame where the player can input a move that would not normally be usable while in the air. So normally after SpongeBob gets damaged by goo and gets sent flying, all we can do is input a double jump to fly back to safety, because SpongeBob cannot use his single jump in midair. But due to animation overlapping on this one singular frame, SpongeBob can use his single jump in midair and then use a second jump to perform what we call a frame-perfect damage triple jump. Battle for Bikini Bottom is one of the fortunate games from the early 2000s which runs at a clean 60 frames per second. As such, the player only has 1/60th of a second to press the A button after the animation, otherwise you will go straight to your double jump or not get a jump at all. You have to hit it on this exact frame in order to get both jumps required to clear the cliff. For those of you who aren't used to playing video games with this high precision, here's a visual to help explain how small of a window this is. As I am speaking to you now, SpongeBob is appearing on the screen for exactly one frame each passing second. This is a visual representation of how long the player has to press the A button, otherwise the trick doesn't work. And if your device is set to playback on 30 FPS, you might not even be able to see it. This is just one of many examples throughout this 40+ minute run where missing something by exactly one frame can destroy your pace and make achieving world record impossible. So to recap hammer skip quickly, the player must notice where the robot is in relation to the fish to make sure it doesn't get stuck on it and run straight to the cliff. The player must then manipulate it to stand on top of the cliff, jump off its head, bounce off the goo, and anticipate one of 5 different animations that can play. Quickly retrieve muscle memory for the exact animation that plays and jump on the exact frame when it ends. And if you do this the right way, SpongeBob will get a single jump as shown here, and then you'll be allowed to double jump after, thus allowing him to clear this cliff and successfully skip this whole section of Jellyfish Fields. If you think this sounds complex, this is only just the beginning. So if you're enjoying these explanations and you're loving this speedrun so far, hit that like button. I will make the second part as soon as possible. Alright, so now that we've reached the top of the hill, you see this Duplicatotron right here. It's what we call them. It's designed to create more robots and spit them out, which is again random, but we can avoid all that because by doing hammer skip we have skipped the trigger that causes the robots to spawn. However, it's still blocking a button that is used to open this gate. So if we just slip behind it and use this bubble spin attack in just the right fashion to barely hit it from behind, we can skip having to fight the robots and destroy the Duplicatotron and collect the spatula immediately. And that does it for the first section of Jellyfish Fields. Now I'm going to introduce you to another mechanic in this game called tongue boarding. Just like in the show, SpongeBob can slide on his his tongue, and all he has to do is be in contact with one of these designated surfaces which cause him to go into that state. Sliding makes SpongeBob move a little quicker and gives him an active hitbox which will plow anything in his way. So while we're on this slide, we're going to veer off and jump onto this hidden section to the right where we can get some extra shiny objects from comboing these tikis and collect a hidden sock on the way. When we reach the end of this slide, I'm going to attempt a very precise movement trick which I actually did mess up in this run. So I'll show you how this played out, and then I'll just show you a clip from another run where I actually got it, and I'll explain to you how it works there. I feel like people are just afraid they're going to distract me. Alright, so a lot just happened there, and you're probably confused as to what I messed up, but you'll understand soon, don't worry. This clip is taken from a run where I got the trick. As you can see, I spaced my jump off the slide so that way I'm slightly off the edge. And if I just barely grace the edge of this platform where the sock is, I can have the sock attract to me and be collected, while still maintaining my slide momentum and slipping off of it. Now this is the cool part. I'm going to perform a frame-perfect jump off the ground to maintain my momentum and slip into the cutscene trigger like I did before. But doing it this way and sliding into the cutscene with this momentum saves an extra second off the run. But consistently in both runs, we have actually activated this cutscene while dying, which means that instead of watching this cutscene play out, we can just die while it's playing, respawn, and go back to the last checkpoint. So during this whole maneuver while we gracefully grab the sock and bounce off the ground in one frame, we also have to be mindful to go through this checkpoint trigger that exists on this lower platform. In the past, I've actually had runs that died because I got the sock and then the frame perfect jump, but I didn't notice that I missed the checkpoint, so important to pay attention to that. So now that we've skipped the cutscene that details the robot fight, we are now going to skip the robot fight itself. This is what we call Patrick's Dilemma skip. You'll notice some very robotic movements leading up to this area, and shortly after you'll see a robot is going to spawn in my path. By lining this up with the area where Patrick is standing, and spacing these two jumps perfectly over the hammer's hitbox, it'll give me a good whack and I will slide off the edge of this cliff while still maintaining my momentum. In doing so, I can use grounded moves in midair like I was talking about earlier, except we have two major benefits we did not have during hammer skip. The first is that sliding off a ledge gives you several frames to use the grounded move in midair instead of only one. The second is that sliding off the ledge mostly levels off your down momentum, so that way when we use the grounded move, we can maintain more height, which is needed to touch the trigger, which initiates the conversation with Patrick. So we're going to set this up, take damage, and slide off. Then use the grounded bubble bash move in midair, fly up to the sky, and initiate the conversation with Patrick. And in doing so, we have skipped a lot of gameplay. Now unfortunately, you don't get to see Patrick gameplay here just yet. We are only going to be collecting the spatula as him and warping back to Bikini Bottom. But if you hit the like button and subscribe for future parts, you're really going to enjoy what's next. Thanks for watching, and next time we're going to talk about how to speedrun downtown Bikini Bottom and our journey to get 75 spatulas and finish the game. This is a visual representation of how long the player has to press the A button, otherwise the trick doesn't work. Your device is set to playback on